Good morning. Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in and watching this video. All right, so I had a couple videos planned, but they were going to be short videos, but they kind of, they're kind of connected with each other. So I figured I'd go ahead and put it all together in one video, and I think I can still potentially keep this kind of short. All right, so one of the things that I would like to do is to have basically put America back to work. There's a lot of jobs that are somewhat becoming obsolete due to technology, and there are employers who are preferring to go the technological route versus putting people to work. And they're banking from this, but you have a lot of people who have to you know change up their work fields, their career fields, or just suffer from unemployment altogether. And the way that I would the way that I would purposely like to go about things is changing the system. You've probably ever, if you've tuned into some of my previous videos, you've more than likely heard me say, refer to changing the system, quite a few times, or, something in regards to the current system not working. So there are things, that I have, planned or whatever that I would like to put in place that would put a lot of people back to work. And one of them is, which I, which I'm positive I've covered at least to some degree in another video, which is criminal justice reform. There are a lot of individuals right now and who shouldn't be employed in the criminal justice system. And my plans for this has positive and negatives to it. So criminal justice reform would change up a few things. It would change up a few things, and cleaning house would be one of those things. Finding the individuals who are unqualified, unfit, and just who don't belong in that field, and remove those individuals from that field. And that in itself would open up job opportunities for individuals who are more qualified, who are fit to be in that field. It does, however, put those other individuals out of a job temporarily. I don't think that, with the other things that I would like to put in place, that they would have a problem finding employment. It's just that they wouldn't be employed in those positions of power. But criminal justice reform will bring about changes and, additional and potentially new job opportunities in the judicial branch, in the corrections branch, in the law enforcement branch, and even to the degree of some of their newer concepts. So they're not necessarily newer jobs. They're existing jobs with, I guess, additional responsibilities that would open up, more potential, more need, for them, more demand for them, And I've briefly gone over that a little bit in a previous video referring to, I think it was our children's welfare video, where there are jobs that are designed specifically to get ahead of existing problems with our youth, existing dangers with our youth, and potential dangers that some of our youth have not faced yet. And a lot of those jobs are already existing, not in the sense that those jobs are existing and doing what I would have them designed to do. Those jobs are existing in a sense where they're doing something totally different, but it can be expanded to cover, what they're already doing, and the jobs that I would have them fulfill. So, like I said, in regards to DJJ, Department of Juvenile Justice, they're already doing the detention part. They're already doing the probation parole part, but there's also the proactive part of it, and being involved in the schools, because that's where the majority of our youth are. And that's where a lot of ongoing problems are taking place, or are starting, or can be detected. So it only makes sense that if we want to get ahead of a lot of the problems with our youth and in the criminal justice system referring to children, that we start there, where our children spend the majority of their days and their interactions, and where the majority of intelligence can be gathered. I've also expanded that to child protective services investigators. I've also expanded that to people in the medical field, as far as mental health and other things. So, criminal justice reform in itself will employ a lot of people who aren't currently employed. To some degree, it will make some people unemployed as well from that field. But also, so I just wanted to throw that out there. That criminal justice reform will bring about more jobs, but also, there's the negative side to it, that there are going to be a lot of individuals who would be put out of a job. There are those cases. If you look at, if you're following the news now, and this is July of 2019, if you're following the news now, there's a lot of issues going on where I think upwards of 70 something police officers in Philadelphia were removed from the streets because of racial issues. There's ongoing court cases with other law enforcement agencies in the area. I won't name them because those cases are ongoing, with racial profiling and other issues. There's issues with, I think they took the page down, but there were, I think, over 1,000 or 10,000 something current and former CBP employees and other law enforcement personnel who were a part of this like major group of, just spewing like racism and hate and all this other stuff. There was a bunch of cops over in, I want to say it's Dallas, but I'm not sure. I would have to go back and check, but I know it was in the Texas area, with a couple of different law enforcement agencies where some of those cops are getting caught up in a lot of racial issues as well. Then there are those that the FBI is aware of, who are a part of hate groups that have infiltrated law enforcement. This information was pushed to George W. Bush back during his terms. And a lot of these guys are still employed. So, there are a lot of individuals who are unfit to be in, law enforcement and even in correction system, and, where their biases may and have to be taken into account. Not only their biases, but prejudices has to be taken into account of how they do their jobs, so on and so forth. And if that's not you, also there are individuals who are just unfit to be out in the street. They're not safe, afraid of every little thing, refuse to respond, to calls for service when, that's part of their job. So there are individuals who won't, have a job in that case. Moving on. All right. So universal health care. So in establishing universal health care here in the U.S., we're talking about so many different types of coverage, dental, medical, mental health, getting your eyes checked out, different surgical specialists, dietary. I mean, it just branches out in so many different areas and different fields, and even to the degree there are forms of medicine that aren't widely practiced, like natural-based medication and stuff like that. There's so much that we can explore, in helping people to stay healthy, to become healthy, to prevent, further illnesses in the future, and then to recover from injuries and so on and so forth. So universal healthcare in itself is going to open up so many opportunities for employment. You got specialty clinics that have to open up all over the place. You have community clinics, places where people can take their children, where they can go and check in themselves and get checked out without having to rush to the emergency room and rack up crazy bills for something that can be treated at local clinics. And yes, I know there are those communities that have these already, but there are many of communities that don't, or where people have to go way out of their way to seek help. A major part of that is tied into the Veterans Affairs, into Veteran Affairs, where a lot of us veterans have to drive, long distances just, to check in with our doctors or specialists, whoever. But that also pertains to a lot of communities as well. So hospitals and hospices, one thing that's a given is that, dying happens. Everyone's expected to die. Hospices are, that need isn't really going anywhere. Hospitals, people get sick, people die, from car accidents or whatever, things happen. So that work isn't going anywhere either. Having medical professionals in the schools. So, again, with the way that I would like to reform the way that schools are handled and managed, there would be more medical personnel in the schools, to include mental health specialists, nurses, maybe, a doctor or two per school, depending on how big those schools would be, which my estimation would be that those schools would be a lot bigger. Schools will become a lot bigger over time, and therefore, more medical staff may be needed. Then you have support staff. You have the individuals who drive, support and transportation. You have those who clean up those facilities, those who, transport goods back and forth. What I've been seeing lately are mobile pharmacists or, pharmacy deliveries. Again, something that can be taken into consideration as additional jobs become available. Then you have home health aides, home nurses, and even potentially going back to doctors' visits. Doctors visiting the homes of people who can't necessarily make it to their doctors or whatever. There's a lot of potential for universal health care and for varying specialties, in those fields. Another thing that I would like to do, like I said, all right, so in addressing our drug problem, America's drug problems and stuff like that, which is a major problem in a lot of urban cities, there are a lot of people who are going to need various types of health care as well. But I also would like to hold those governments accountable. You're paying your taxes, for everyone who lives in those areas, you're paying your taxes, and for whatever reasons, those respective governments have let a lot of those urban cities and even some of those rural areas just fall apart. That money's going somewhere, and it should be, invested back into those communities. You have your law enforcement who are in place, from the local level all the way up to the federal level. These drug issues should be addressed and dealt with. That's what they're, hired to do, amongst other things. There's no reason that those issues aren't being properly handled and effectively handled. And if it's to the point where law enforcement can't do their job, in other words, they should be doing their job. They should be doing something about it. If they can't do something about it, then we need to go a different route about how to handle that problem so that it can be addressed and dealt with accordingly. In regards to the traffickers, in regards to the distributors, so on and so forth. Now, in regards to the dealers on the street, like I said, there's going to be a lot of jobs that open up, so a lot of people won't have to deal drugs. For those individuals who do it because they're struggling financially and can't find work or whatever, a lot of jobs will be open, a lot of opportunities for starting your own businesses, and basically bringing money back into, your community and stuff like that. So instead of, hundreds of billions of dollars or whatever going out, into drugs and stuff, there'll be room for small businesses, which I'm a big supporter of small businesses. You got your barbershops, you got your corner stores, you got restaurants, you got plumbing businesses, electricians, mechanics, potentially opening up nightclubs, excuse me, theater, especially between the nightclubs and theater, and learning your heritage and learning, cultural arts, dancing, music, so on and so forth. That definitely, in acting, that definitely opens up room for local nightclubs, jazz clubs, blues clubs, whatever. And, bringing back the art of theater, to where there are stage plays, that you can go to. Many of us like to go to movies. A lot of us have gotten away from, I don't even want to say gotten away from, a lot of us really haven't been exposed to the art of theater, so being able to have more theaters popping up and people respecting different arts of different cultures and stuff like that, I think would be awesome. And, a lot of that stuff is going to be taught in this, in the schools anyway, or would be taught in the schools if, education reform was done the way that I wanted to have it done. Okay, so now we're also talking about rebuilding a lot of these slums, a lot of these messed up and destroyed communities. Some of those places are just structurally, they're some of those places have to be torn down, and if they're torn down, something has to be rebuilt in its process. If it's not being torn down, chances are it has to be renovated. It has to be brought up to code. So now we're talking about, when we're talking about rebuilding communities as a whole, you're definitely talking about more work for construction workers, more work for electricians, more work for plumbing, more jobs that, code enforcement has to look into. Waste management, and destroying those buildings and, cleaning up a lot of these areas and stuff like that. That trash has to go somewhere, which I'm looking into some programs and possibilities about how to destroy trash and other waste as well without really, while minimizing damage to our environment, which I will drop another video about that later. And then you're talking DOT jobs, and fixing a lot of those roads and stuff like that. There will be a lot of open jobs, job opportunities as well. And in, rebuilding some of these communities, I would, think that there would be opportunities for DOT personnel as well. So, and we're talking about across the nation. So this is the potential for a lot of different jobs. And then you have communities that are still being built. There are new housing developments, a lot of these small townships in county rural areas are starting to be built up and be turned into, small cities or whatever. So, there's a lot of room. There's a lot of opportunity for growth and for small businesses, and to create new jobs. It's just about, being open-minded, thinking outside the box, and, kind of going for it. And then you got education reform. So, obviously you have the admin jobs, you have the teachers. The way I would want it, which I'm gonna have to cover more in depth, more in detail, probably in a series of videos, with education reform, is I would want it at least one teacher assistant with every teacher. Then you got your counselors, you got your mentors, which would be mandatory. And putting that in place, we're going to put a lot more positive role models into these children's lives. We're going to keep a lot more children away from the street gangs. We're going to keep a lot more children away from the street life, going out there and doing crazy stuff that's getting a lot of these kids killed or locked up and ruining their lives at an early stage in their life. Then you have the support staff that'll be working in those schools, transportation staff in regards to, buses, after school program, transportation for after school programs. Then you have all of the new curriculum that's not already included in schools. So we're talking languages. So French, Spanish, Creole, which there are different dialects of all this stuff. Mandarin, various Asian languages. That Middle Eastern languages. Basically, there's languages all over the world. There are various cultures all over the world, and the U.S. is a melting pot. So in changing up the education system where a lot of this stuff is taught, there's going to be plenty of room for people who specialize in these fields, as well as researchers and specialists who are going out there and writing books on these topics and doing documentary videos and producing educational material that's going to be used in the education system. Then you got the athletics, you got the clubs, you got the defense classes, which I think I've covered in another video. But I will go more in depth in a series of videos pertaining to education reform, how I vision it. But self-defense is a big part of it. There's a lot of people out here who can't really handle themselves. Some of those individuals are more likely to pick up a weapon and seriously hurt another individual or end their life. Versus if you know how to defend yourself, you have confidence in your self-ability, and you have the right discipline of mind. If you lose a fight, you lose a fight. If you win a fight, you win a fight. But it's better to know how to handle yourself than to, one, either revert to using weapons and killing people, or two, feel as though you're so bullied, so on and so forth, and then you go out and commit suicide or something crazy like that, or go into drugs or whatever. But I think that has, and it also teaches discipline in different ways. So that's something that I want to implement into the schools, arts and specialties like dance, culture, music, acting, some of the stuff that I mentioned earlier in regards to theater and different jobs like that. Different businesses. And then you got the medical portion, which I've said before. I want to bring in medical specialists into the schools to be able to look after our children's health, mental health, physical health, even spiritual health, because we do have varying religious and faith backgrounds. Then you have the law enforcement portion. So like I've said, child protective services investigators, DJJ specialists, or whatever that particular safety net would be for the schools, both to enforce a lot of things as far as child safety, things involved in their lives and stuff like that, things that are relevant to the schools, investigating other issues. So in doing this, a lot of jobs will be created. Again, like I've mentioned before, there's a lot of room for small businesses, and helping to keep a lot of these children off the street and out of trouble, And then there are the government jobs, government positions as well, and contracting gigs. All right, so with all of that said, now I want to jump into something else. In creating a lot of jobs and in helping people to get off the drugs and stuff like that, and in rebuilding and reboosting some of these economies. I know a lot of people are like, hey, that's going to cost a lot of money. It is. It's going to cost a lot of money and time. Truthfully, the majority of the goals that I would like to put in place, I even if I was to get elected, and re-elected and do 8 years, it would just be the starting. It would just be the beginning of a lot of those things taking place and being rooted and growing from there. You know, so education is a big part of what I would like to do as well. Not in regards to the education reform, but in educating and empowering other people to continue to make improvements, to continue to improve the U.S. In the way that many of these states, counties, and cities and everything else needs to be improved. But I also want to change the government assistance programs. All right, so there are a lot of individuals who are on government assistance, and with jobs available, many of those people won't qualify or shouldn't qualify for those programs. Now, there are individuals who will continue to qualify. People who are disabled, people who have some type of disability that prevents them from working or prevents them from taking care of themselves. Even in some cases, I do understand that there are disabled individuals who go out here and find employment, and still they will probably more than likely qualify to continue to receive certain types of government assistance as needed. But in regards to living off of government assistance and being completely dependent upon government assistance, is my belief that has to go. If you need the help, you need the help, and there will still be programs in place to help individuals for a short period of time to get back on their feet, but with the ability and with the resources and funding to create businesses, to create small businesses, with job opportunities to be able to go to work for many of those small businesses, as well as already existing jobs. And if done correctly, there will be minimal need for people to be on certain government assistance programs. Now, in regards to WIC, a baby can throw your finances off in all different types of ways, so I wouldn't want to remove WIC or anything like that. I guess I forgot to touch on making the cost of living more affordable. I'm gonna have to cover that in a different video, but it does pertain to this. So if the cost of living is more affordable, plus there are more jobs that are paying a bit more, and more people working, which means more money, flowing around through the economy, there's opportunity eventually. And I'm not saying that it would have to take place, during my term or terms if I was to make it into office. But eventually, I know that some politician somewhere is going to want to increase taxes. It's bound to happen regardless whether these things were to take, form and become a reality or not. My thing is, for now, the top 1% who can sit here and hoard, a bunch of money at our expense and stuff like that they're the ones that's being taxed. And as we improve, as more jobs become available, as less people are on welfare, needing to be on welfare, with more opportunity being available to them, less people on welfare, that's more money that doesn't have to go into the welfare system, that can go toward funding, and taking care of a lot of these issues, as well as some of the other areas where we can draw back funds from. I have to cut this video short, But thank you for tuning in, and I'll try to cover more of this information more in depth in other videos.